A very good afternoon to you. This is, of course, a chat up with me, Jamie, right here on Relax Radio. Hope you are having yourself an amazing, amazing day so far. And if you're not, well, then don't worry. Make sure that you keep it tuned right here on Relax Radio because we are making sure that we give out that positive energy that you need in order to, get through every single day of your life. Now, with that being said, I will be here with you for quite some time, having some very interesting conversation. So if you want to say hi to me or if you want to add on to anything I'm saying or have a conversation with me, it's super simple. All you got to do is say hi to me on whatever social media platform, that is Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter, or you could simply just call me on WhatsApp and we could definitely have a conversation. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about something very interesting, and that is toxic work culture or toxic workplace culture. Now, I know the instance you hear this, you're probably going to think to yourself, oh, well, this doesn't really concern me because I don't face toxic workplace culture. I have a good workplace and I am happy with what's going on in my workplace, which could be the case, which could be very true. But first of all, I want to share with you some points that ensure, or that signs rather, that show off a toxic workplace culture. So, what I want you to do is, first of all, I'll share with you these few points that point towards toxic workplace culture. And I want to think to yourself, is your everyday workplace, or does your everyday workplace have these little things? Do you experience these things in your workplace? And if so, then you are definitely having or in a toxic work culture. Now, first of all, a toxic work culture is one where your workplace is plagued by, say, fighting and drama and unnecessary negativity, and it point to a point that productivity and the well-being of the people in the office is definitely affected. So I feel like you need to prioritize the development of a good workplace culture, not just for the benefit of the employees, but for the benefit of the entire company or workplace in itself. Because individuals as human beings, employees as human beings, can only be fully productive and showcase their full potential if they are mentally stable, and if they're happy, and if there is no negative energy in the workplace. Now, I want to talk about a few signs of a toxic workplace culture that, both if you're a boss or a leader or if you're an employee, you should definitely look out for these signs and avoid them. First of all is low morale at work. Now, a positive attitude and a high morale to accomplish tasks is definitely contagious. I feel like this attitude of productivity is almost similar to smiling. You know how people say, when you smile, you make somebody else smile as well, because a smile is contagious. The same analogy could definitely be used when it comes to productivity. When you have a positive attitude, when you have a high morale, and when you want to get your daily tasks done to the maximum of your ability, that essentially is contagious. And a lot of people are going to want to follow that attitude. Now, when people smile and speak politely to each others and share jokes and quickly, this idea or this happiness quickly catches on and shows in how productivity or how productive and happy at work everyone is. Unfortunately, I want to remind you that the opposite is also true. So, if you observe that the entire office exhibits low morale, then a toxic workplace might be to blame. Now, I'm not talking about Monday blues, I'm not talking about occasional bad days, but I'm talking about a situation where there seems to be a black cloud always hanging over the office that leads, or that is subsequent to low energy and joylessness at work. Like, the only reason an employee or employer is showed up to work today is because they must and they need that paycheck, and not because they want to. Now, if that happens, then you know that there's low morale at work, and that essentially is one of the first sign points, or signposts rather, of a toxic work culture. Now, the second thing that definitely signs towards a toxic culture or toxic workplace is the lack of communication. Now, especially if you work with multiple people, if you work in an office, if you work in a company where there are different levels of hierarchy, where there's different duties assigned to different people or delegated to different people, it's super important that information gets around correctly. Now, how exactly is information going to get around if people are not communicating properly? So it's super important that employees are able to get the information they need to get the work they to get this work done. And that essentially means that the employer or the boss needs to be able to communicate well, needs to assign tasks with precise communication. Similarly, employees need to be able to speak up as well. They need to communicate their feelings. They need to communicate if you don't understand how to do a certain task. Employees need to be able to communicate that to the top tier management or whatever. Now, a key sign of a toxic work culture is that communication normally flows only one way. Now, as directives from the higher ups to the employees, if employees are afraid to ask questions either because they will be singled out for not understanding quickly enough or nothing will be done, that essentially showcases a toxic workplace environment. This, among many other things, can definitely lead to repetition of work and lost time and lost productivity. Now, the other thing is um, controversial, I would say, because if you as an employee afraid of the employer, or if you're afraid of or intimidated by your boss, then that essentially also could point to a toxic workplace. Because there's definitely see, when it comes to respect in itself, there's definitely such a huge difference between a healthy respect for a boss or an employer, and there's a difference between healthy respect and downright fear. When no one but the boss he's speaking, if it's a meeting or whatever, and when people avoid going down the corridor when, say, they're afraid they might bump into the boss, there's definitely a problem with the culture and it needs to be addressed immediately. So, if the boss sets the tone or the employer sets the tone for the workplace culture, and their management and interaction style can either lead to toxic workplace culture or one where the employees are actually happy. So, these are a few things that definitely point out to a toxic workplace culture. Then there's things like if there's a high employee turnover, if there are cliques or groups in office that don't communicate with each other, and if there's this policies that are put in place to support people, but an organization that constantly puts policies ahead of people, it can definitely breed a toxic work culture. Now, if in your workplace, if you experience these little things, there are definitely signs that your work culture or the place you work in is essentially very negative and is very toxic, and it needs to be addressed. Okay, it needs to be addressed right now, just because it affects a toxic workplace, essentially that negative energy, the low morale, it all affects how productive work is done. So if a company as a whole, or if an organization wants to improve on productivity, wants to focus on profits, wants to ensure that work is going to get done, it's super important that they breed a healthy culture where people are actually not afraid to speak up, and where there's a high morale and a positive attitude among employees. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, now that we got the whole toxic workplace culture out of the way, I completely understand that as of recent, a lot of us work from home, right? A lot of us are engaged in remote work with COVID-19. A lot of us are engaging in our work activities from the comforts of our home. Now, the first thing when this comes up, you're probably going to think, oh, well, that's not a problem. I don't have to worry about toxic workplace culture if I work from home or if I work remotely. But working outside the office should technically, and according to textbook, working outside the office should help to de-escalate rather the workplace toxicity. But I feel like in reality, dysfunctional workplace culture might actually get so much worse when you're at home. Now, I know it's not something that a lot of you would have thought of in the first instance, but it's actually so true. So I want you to stick around, and I want you to stick around so that you can hear about this more and more.